You know, talking to an INFJ feels like peeling back the layers of a really intricate painting. Like every time someone thinks they've seen the whole picture, there's more detail hiding in the shadows. And honestly, that's exactly how it is with INFJs and their interests. From the outside, it might look like they're just into the usual quiet hobbies, reading, journaling, maybe listening to music, but there's a whole lot people don't know about them. INFJs don't just read a book. They feel it. They read between the lines, catch the emotional undercurrents the author didn't even know they were writing. And then they go on this deep dive into the character's motivations like they're the character's therapist or something. They see emotional blueprints in every scene, and if the story's layered enough, it'll stay in their head for weeks. It's like they carry pieces of those characters with them, not just for fun, but because they remind them of something true, something about themselves or the world, or maybe even something they're trying to understand but haven't found words for yet. To unlock the power of your INFJ personality, check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. There's also this strange fascination INFJs have with time, not in the clocks and calendars way, but more like moments, fleeting memories, patterns, déjà vu. They collect these little fragments and tuck them away like they're puzzle pieces to something bigger. And when one lines up just right, like hearing a song that matches the exact feeling of memory they haven't visited in years, they light up in this quiet, intense way that most people wouldn't even catch. Only an INFJ would be deeply interested in how strangers walk, or how they speak when they're hiding pain. They'll sit across the room and notice the way someone's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes, and next thing you know, they're building that person's entire backstory in their mind. Not to be nosy, not even to judge, it's more like they want to understand the why. Pain and beauty and contradiction all fascinate them, especially when they exist in the same space. INFJs seem to have this pull toward really specific, oddly poetic things, like rain hitting windows, or the sound of train stations at night, or looking at the moon and feeling like it knows something they don't. They romanticize moments that other people might overlook, and not in a corny way, more like they see the soul of things. They'll stare at a withering leaf and somehow draw a connection between that and something someone said to them 5 years ago. Their mind is wired for meaning, always looking for the thread that ties everything together. Dreams aren't just dreams to an INFJ. They're messages. If they wake up from some strange dream, maybe they were running through an empty school or talking to someone who's long gone, they don't just brush it off. They sit with it. They interpret it. They try to decipher what their subconscious is trying to say. They even start connecting that dream to patterns in their waking life. Most people think that's weird, but to the INFJ, it's just part of how they process the world. There's something sacred in the unseen, and they're not afraid to dig into it. INFJs also blur the line between the spiritual and the psychological. One day they're reading Carl Jung, and the next they're pulling tarot cards, not necessarily because they believe in magic, but because symbols speak to them. These symbols help organize the emotional chaos in their mind. Their inner world is too deep for language sometimes, so they use metaphor and imagery to translate it. And no one people watches like an INFJ. They're not just scanning faces or watching outfits. They're reading energy. They're picking up on the unspoken, sensing who's struggling, who's hiding joy, who's pretending to be okay. And half the time, they don't even realize they're doing it. It's just their nature, quietly observing, quietly absorbing, until one little look or gesture sends them down a spiral of compassion and curiosity. Sometimes, INFJs even find comfort in sadness, not because they want to be sad, but because there's something honest in melancholy. They don't run from heavy feelings. They sit with them. They study them. They make art out of them. They'd rather feel deeply than float on the surface, even if it means carrying a little more emotional weight. And the funny thing, they don't always show all this. They keep it tucked away, behind a smile, behind a kind word. Most people don't even know the depths of what's going on in their head. But when someone does see it, when someone actually gets that part of them, it's like unlocking a vault full of thoughts, dreams, fears, ideas, and this rare kind of beauty that only comes from someone who's been paying attention all along. And here's the thing. INFJs don't even try to be different. Their interests just naturally drift in directions that most people wouldn't think to explore. It's not about being quirky or mysterious on purpose. It's simply how they're wired. Their minds are always wandering beneath the surface, trying to understand what lies behind the obvious. So while others might scroll endlessly through social media, the INFJ is off somewhere pondering the emotional architecture of a film character who only had 5 minutes of screen time. They can become obsessed with symbolism, like how colors in a movie reflect the emotional state of a character, or how architecture in a dream might mirror a psychological block. They'll find deeper meaning in things most people label trivial. A flower blooming in a crack in the sidewalk isn't just a flower to them. It's resilience. It's a metaphor for growth and adversity. It's a reminder that even in forgotten places, beauty still finds a way. INFJs are also magnetically drawn to dualities, light and shadow, joy and sorrow, order and chaos. They don't run from complexity. They embrace it. They're the ones who find something profoundly peaceful in a stormy sky, who can laugh while crying, who feel comforted by bittersweet music. They can sit in contradiction and not need to resolve it. They understand that life is rarely black and white. It's made of the grays too. And when it comes to solitude, INFJs don't just enjoy being alone. They thrive in it. But not in an empty, bored kind of way. Their solitude is active, alive, full of reflection and quiet creation. They'll go hours, even days, without saying much, not because they're sad or lonely, but because their inner world is just that fulfilling. They're sculpting thoughts, connecting past experiences, revisiting things that others would have forgotten, and building ideas that haven't yet been born. They could spend an entire evening sitting quietly by the window, tea in hand, thinking about a conversation they had 3 years ago that didn't feel complete. And in that moment, they're content. Even INFJ's sense of humor is unexpected. On the surface, they might seem serious, deep, maybe even reserved. But give it time, and suddenly they'll hit you with this dark, subtle, sometimes absurd humor that completely catches you off guard. They find funny things in oddly specific situations, like the existential crisis of a lost sock or the awkward poetry of a badly timed hug. Their humor often has layers, references, even hidden emotional truths wrapped in the punchline. And they love it when someone actually gets it, because so often people don't. Music, too, is a portal for INFJs. But they don't just choose songs based on genre. They choose them based on emotion. Each song in their playlist maps to a particular mood, a specific memory, or a version of themselves they only show when the room is dark and no one's around. Some songs are their personal therapy. Others are like prayers. And many of them, they can't even explain why they love. They just feel right. One of the most fascinating things about INFJs is their love for fictional worlds. And not in a casual, this show is cool kind of way. No, INFJs live in stories. They inhabit them. They become attached to fictional characters like they're real people because they see the humanity in them so clearly. They'll analyze a character's every decision, map their emotional growth, and sometimes even use their arc to understand their own journey. For them, fiction isn't an escape, it's a mirror. And despite being so intuitive and thoughtful, INFJs are often drawn to the mystical. Not because they blindly believe, but because they sense that there's more to existence than meets the eye. They're curious about the unseen, the unmeasurable, the parts of reality that can't be explained through logic alone. They might light a candle and sit in silence not to perform a ritual, but to acknowledge that something sacred is happening within them, something language can't quite hold. Honestly, if someone really wants to understand INFJs, they'd have to stop looking for big, flashy expressions and start paying attention to the quiet choices. The way they linger in conversations long after others have moved on, or how their eyes light up when someone talks about transformation, healing, or destiny. So yes, INFJs have weird interests, but they're not random. They're deeply intentional, emotionally intelligent, and spiritually rich. The deeper you go into the INFJ world, the more you realize it's not just about what they're interested in, it's about why. There's always a reason, a story behind a story. INFJs don't just pick up a hobby or watch a film for entertainment. It's more like they're drawn to the energy of it. They gravitate toward the things that speak in whispers rather than shouts. The overlooked, the mysterious, the emotionally charged. And that's why INFJs can spend hours studying things like handwriting, not to forge signatures or anything wild, but because they see the personality in the curve of a letter, the hesitation in a line, the way someone dots their I. It tells them something subtle but real. They're fascinated by anything that offers a hidden glimpse into the human soul, no matter how small. To unlock the power of your INFJ personality, check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. Their interests often have a nostalgic flavor to them too. INFJs carry memories like sacred texts. They revisit them, relive them, find new meanings in old wounds and joys. A simple song from childhood can send them into a spiral of thought about who they were, who they've become, and the gap between those two selves. Even the scent of rain or a glimpse of an old photograph can pull them into a quiet, reflective space where they process emotions that most people try to ignore. Let's talk about INFJs and languages. Not just spoken ones, but emotional languages, body languages, symbolic languages. Many INFJs love actual foreign languages because they see it as unlocking new ways to understand the world. But what really excites them is when they find a new framework for expressing internal experiences. Poetry does that. Photography does that. Even dance, though INFJs might not always perform, can enchant them for the way it conveys feeling without needing a single word. Sometimes their interests even veer into the arcane or obscure. They might be fascinated by ancient myths, not just for the stories, but for the archetypes, the symbolism, the cultural DNA they carry. They see patterns in those old tales that still show up today, in people, in politics, in relationships, and they're not afraid to draw those connections, even if it makes them sound a little out there. INFJs can get lost in the past, reflecting, analyzing, grieving, cherishing, but they're equally obsessed with the future, not in a practical, to-do list kind of way, but in a visionary sense. They're always dreaming, imagining what could be, building possibilities in their minds. But the now, that's often the hardest for them to stay grounded in. It's not that they're unaware, it's that their mind is always dancing between what was and what might be. And a lot of their interests reflect that tension. And you know what else? INFJs are collectors, but not always of physical things. They collect meaningful things. Sentences, glances, fleeting conversations, quotes that change their perspective, a feather found on a walk that reminded them of a friend, a melody they heard once at sunset. They may not even share these with anyone, but they store them like treasures, silently stitching them into the fabric of who they are. Even their sense of beauty is different. While many chase trends or aesthetic perfection, INFJs are drawn to the imperfect, the raw, the authentic. They'll find a crooked tree more beautiful than a trimmed hedge, or a face lined with age and experience more striking than an airbrush model. There's something about the real, the earned, the unspoken stories embedded in things that captures them deeply. Another interest they have is their attraction to depth in conversation. INFJs can struggle with small talk, not because they're antisocial, but because it doesn't feed them. What lights them up is a conversation that cuts past the surface. They want to know what keeps someone up at night, what someone's earliest memory was, what belief they used to hold but had to let go of. Give them depth, give them realness, and they'll open like a hidden door. They're also fascinated by dual identity, not just in themselves, but in others. The idea that a person can be both confident and insecure, kind but guarded, free yet burdened. That internal contradiction doesn't scare INFJs. It attracts them. They want to understand what people carry, not just what they show. That's why they love masks. Not literal ones, but psychological ones. INFJs will notice when someone laughs a little too quickly or changes the subject a little too fast. They pick up on the signals that reveal what's really going on underneath. And INFJs don't just like writing. They need it. Writing for them isn't just a creative outlet. It's survival. It's clarity. It's how they untangle all the threads in their mind. When they journal, it's like they're having a one-on-one with their soul. And half the time, they don't even realize how deep their thoughts run until they see them on the page. It's not unusual for them to go back and read something they wrote and think, did that really come from me? Their minds are basically magnets for invisible connections. A color might remind them of a season. A smell might bring back an entire scene from childhood. A stranger's facial expression might echo something from a dream. They notice these things, and instead of brushing them off, they let those connections shape their mood, their thoughts, even their day. To others, that might seem hypersensitive. To INFJs, it's just natural. It's how their minds breathe. Their connection to nature is often very private and emotional. INFJs can feel more seen by a tree than a person. They walk through forests or sit by rivers and don't just see scenery, they feel presence. They sense rhythm, history, and wisdom in the natural world. Nature is like an old friend who doesn't demand anything, yet offers everything: space, symbolism, quiet understanding. And it's wild how many INFJs are fascinated by endings. Not just death in the literal sense, but the ending of things, seasons, friendships, phases of life. They reflect on endings with this aching tenderness, this reverence for what once was and what will never be again. They'll hold on to a goodbye like it's a sacred artifact, remembering not just the words spoken, but the feeling in the air, the expression on someone's face, the unspoken tension they didn't know how to name at the time. Even the way INFJs fall into their interests has a quiet intensity. They don't dabble, they immerse. If something captures their mind, they're going to research it, daydream about it, maybe even build an imaginary world around it. It could be an obscure philosophy, a particular aesthetic, a niche historical period. Whatever it is, they're going deep. And while others might outgrow a passion and move on quickly, INFJs often keep the emotional essence of that interest tucked away inside them for life. INFJs aren't interested in things because they're trendy or because they're told they should be. They're drawn to the things that speak to their soul in a voice only they can hear. And yes, that voice may be soft, strange, even ghostly, but it's real. It's them. To unlock the power of your INFJ personality, check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.